Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here, with my next Avatar book review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Chronicles of the Avatar Book 3, The Dawn of Yangchen. So yesterday I put out my non-spoiler review. I still would recommend checking that one out, especially because as I'm releasing this video, we're still quite a bit away from the official release of the book. So, you know, also, if you are watching this video, you do want the spoilers, please don't just like throw the spoilers around the internet without like properly tagging them and stuff like that. Like I'd be saying this even if this was like the 19th and the book was officially out. Especially like the big spoiler, which I'm going to be saving in the video until right at the end, the whole what is the weapon situation. I'm going to save that one until right at the end of the video. Just so as many people can avoid it as absolutely possible. Final thing I'll say just before jumping in is just that on Monday I will be starting my Dawn of Yangchen chapter analysis videos. So the plan will probably be to do one a day, as many days as possible. That should mean that by the time the book actually comes out, I'll have like most of them out on the official release, because I know a lot of people like to read along with them, so just be aware of that. So let's jump in. So in terms of have my general thoughts on the book evolved since yesterday, definitely a little bit. I've had a chance to do more or less a full second read through. Definitely did a little bit quicker, skimming through certain bits just to get through it so I could do the video. I still feel that probably it's still below the two Kyoshi novels for me, but I would definitely say it is still 3 out of 3 in terms of 3 very good Avatar novels. It's not like there's some massive gulf or anything like that, but I do feel that there is going to, for a lot of people, still be a very deep connection to Kyoshi specifically. That arc, that set of characters, because of just how amazingly it all just came together as like the first ever Avatar novel, it being about Kyoshi, the way it was done. Here, it's still really good. Like, it is a proper exploration of Yangchen, and the characters that we get here are interesting, and there's probably a very interesting dynamic going into book 4, because like I discussed in the non-spoiler video, this feels like it is very much a part 1. And book 4, whatever it's called, is going to be part 2. Whereas I do feel the two Kyoshi novels are a little bit more like separate. There's a few points that really connect the two, but Rise does stand on its own, and I think Shadow stands on its own a little bit. Whereas these two are going to be much more heavily interlinked, because I think the plot of book 4 is going to stem like absolutely directly off this, and characters who only get a little bit of screen time here are going to move into the spotlight more in the next book, and that's, I think, going to be very interesting to see how that works. But the complexity is obviously that, like with Yangchen, the arcs maybe aren't as clear as they are with Kyoshi. With Kyoshi, you already had that like really interesting personality of like what an avatar she is. She's the legend, and that like she lives so long, and then she's one of the more kind of blunt to the point, you know, you do what needs to be done as the avatar. Whereas Yangchen, her sort of legacy is more as one of the most competent ever avatars, and even her one sort of, you know, flaw, her mistake in a way, is just that she didn't handle relationships with the spirits like absolutely perfectly, but she's still probably one of the better avatars in terms of trying to deal with the spirits. So it's like a big difference between this avatar who just had like no formal training and everything kind of going wrong, versus like about as close as possible to like a normal avatar dynamic, with a few little things like the haunting of the past avatars and so on. So the thing is, like, there's not maybe as clear-cut things to latch onto, like say with Kyoshi and her past, and it comes out, her having to, you know, learn and accept that she is the avatar like halfway through the book. Here, that's already done for you, and she's already done all of her training. She is a good diplomat already. It's literally just that she's 17 and is only just kind of come into her own. And it's more clearly dealing with that inexperience. Whereas like with Kyoshi, she had to deal with being inexperienced, but having so little, like, in a way, education to back up how to even handle those situations. Whereas Yangchen knows exactly what she needs to do. It's just she's being a little bit disrespected. And it's more subtle in that way, what her arc is, because this is an avatar who is trying her best and is putting everything in to be the ideal avatar. And it's a case where like she has an idea, she knows what she wants to do, but people around her are sort of criticizing like the way she's doing things, of like, she is an avatar, she's an air nomad avatar, and so people are criticizing like, you're using spies and informants and stuff like that, you shouldn't be doing that. But she's like, no, this is what I need to do, so I'm actually aware of what's going on in the world, and I have information to use to my advantage in negotiation, so I can actually get stuff done. She has just that realization of like, there's not really much sort of naivety here. She tries to do the sort of typical thing of, you know, like, just get across the avatar idea of balance and peace, but she's willing to sort of play a little bit of blackmail if she absolutely has to. And I think that's what does make her interesting, because we haven't really seen much of this. Just an avatar who has all of the sort of skills in place, playing that full-on diplomat role here with the Shangs, certain world leader characters and stuff like that. That's interesting. There's also a very interesting dynamic of, she wants to be active as the avatar. She does not want to, you know, be on her heels and only reacting when stuff goes very, very wrong. She wants to be there when there's even the glimmer of something about to go wrong. And that's the whole quote from like the calendar that we had early, the whole idea of it's better to parry the sword than to heal the wound. That she wants to be there to stop the bad thing even happening in the first place, if possible. Stop a wound even happening, rather than arriving on the scene when the wound has already been, you know, inflicted, and there's no guarantee that healing that wound will work out as well as possible. And that's what's gotten across really clearly here. This is why there's such a, in a way, like almost intensity with Yangchen when it comes to handling these situations in the book, is that she does not want to be a passive avatar, because in her experience with past avatars, the regret is always that I could have done more. I should have done more. I should have been more aware of this situation and done more. And she doesn't want to be that. And it's so interesting because when she meets Order of White Lotus character towards the end of the book, she's basically like, she kind of rips into Yangchen about like, you're being an amateur in the way you're doing things. You need to be, you know, hang back a little bit and wait, be patient with these things. That's the way you should do things as the avatar. And this is the exact opposite of how Yangchen actually wants to do things. And the Order of White Lotus character is like, you should really heavily utilize your gift more. You should learn from the past lives more and use their truths, what they've learned to shape what you would need to do. And it's the big moment in the book, in a way, where she just sort of points out that, like, you don't think I've already done that? I spoke to dozens and dozens and dozens of avatars. And it's not as helpful as you think. It's not the clear-cut solution to every single problem. And it's a very interesting point in the book, because you don't get past life scenes with Yangchen. After the excerpt where you get the whole avatar gun situation, you think you're going to learn about avatars in almost like every single chapter, that Yangchen's going to be possessed here, and then here, and then here, and we'll learn about all these little bits and pieces. That doesn't happen in the book. And I think it's the book making the point, in a way, that past life scenes have to be done right. There has to be a meaning to them. You could have it where an avatar is talking to a past avatar in almost every scene. That would greatly diminish what is possible. And so they're sort of making that point, I think, to a degree in this book. But I will admit it is a little unsatisfying that with the setup of her being, you know, possessed, haunted by past avatars, it's kind of surprising it doesn't really happen in the book. The way it actually plays out over the course of the book is that there are moments when Yangchen gets herself into situations that the situation, say, doesn't make her afraid, but it makes one of the past avatars afraid because of a certain trauma or something like that. Like, she's in the underground heating system, going to spy on the Shang merchants. She's not afraid of cramped spaces, but it's clear that she's about to have one of these possession attacks. A haunting, in a way, is about to happen. And it's like, the book makes it clear. A past avatar, or maybe multiple past avatars, must have been afraid of cramped spaces, or something bad must have happened in a situation like this. That's what's causing this to happen. But in general, they have the approach of she is able to usually do some sort of almost like breathing exercises to stop the possession from even happening in the first place. And there's little allusions at the start of early chapters in this book where you get situations where it's like, the opening paragraph with Yangchen as you get into the chapter is like, Yangchen woke up, she like checked the room to make sure it was like where she was, not where a memory of a past avatar was. And it's just that kind of clear cut that this is something she has to deal with. Of like, there are times, I guess, theoretically, where she has maybe woken up straight into a past avatar memory. And sometimes these situations can greatly confuse her if she wakes up in sort of a similar situation to one that she's in. And there's almost like allusions to the idea of like, there's little bits and pieces of things that like she might like forget because she experiences a decent amount of time just in the memories of past avatars. It kind of falls off after some of the early chapters, and it doesn't come back as much as you would think. The main time it comes up is basically like an extension of chapter 1 that happens a bit later on into the book, where you gradually get over the course of the book that Jetson has died, and you don't know what the full situation is with that. But there's little teasers about like, ooh, what must have happened. And then it finally comes out right towards the end. They just basically do the extension of that chapter 1 scene. Her first trip into the spirit world with Jetson. What happens immediately afterwards is that they do find some spirits. They're just looking around. And then all of a sudden, Yangchen has one of these past life kind of panic attack style things, making it clear that one, maybe multiple past avatars were afraid of the spirit world. And so the emotions of an avatar in the spirit world are especially powerful, as we saw in A New Spiritual Age. And Yangchen turns the spirits around them dark, and immediately a peaceful situation becomes dire. And so Yangchen is, basically in a possession type situation. She can't do anything to get out of the spirit world. Jetson has to do it for her. So Jetson sort of sacrifices herself by like throwing Yangchen up into the air to sort of like force her to wake up, as a sort of like, I'm falling, gotta wake up type situation. But it puts her at the risk of the spirits who are like just behind them. And the idea is that she gets sort of like taken. And so Yangchen in the physical world has to basically witness Jetson not returning to her body dying, them having a funeral, but researching, growing to learn that her spirit is still in the spirit world somewhere. Like, everything she knows sort of points to that. But she can never go back into the spirit world and find that location. She just can't seem to find where it was, locate those exact spirits, until at a major point in the book, Yangchen is called back to Mainka Island to deal with the fact that she's already helped the Sauron clan deal with the Phoenix Eel spirits, but they broke the deal, and the Phoenix Eels are now even more angry. So if you recognize that, that is the one of the spirits, one of the incidents that Karuk also dealt with in the Kyoshi books later on that we saw. So really cool stuff that we get like the full exploration of this here. And when she goes to negotiate with the Phoenix Eels, they show her a vision to sort of, in a way, like torture her a little bit. That, oh, you're coming to deal with us again. Well, let's get one over on you. They're aware that she is a little fearful herself of the spirit world, and so they play on that a bit more. by showing her a vision, and the vision is effectively what Jetson is experiencing at that point. And I think what they're suggesting here is that Jetson has been trapped in the fog of lost souls. They don't full on say it, because I suppose the idea is that Yangchen isn't meant to know about the fog of lost souls, but and nothing seems to match that description, but that I think that is what it is, or it's something similar to that, highlighting that at some point going forward, like, this does not get resolved in this book. It's noted a few times, Yangchen wants to find Jetson. She'll do everything she can to find her eventually. So I guess this is going to be a book 4 thing. But I'm guessing she will go to the spirit world, find Jetson, and we'll probably get an interesting dynamic where we'll see if she's able to free her from the fog of lost souls, what happens to Jetson? Does she stay in the spirit world and basically become a spirit like Iroh or the Painted Lady? If she doesn't want to do that, what happens? Like, can she basically try to go back to the physical world, and like her death sort of like completes itself, and like she reincarnates, or whatever way they do it? I'm very interested to see what they do here, because it feels like the setup is that there has to be this reunion. Yangchen has to find her. So what way will this end up working out? So on the whole situation of her dealing with the spirits here, because this is obviously one of the key dynamics we know about with Yangchen, she's furious when she goes back here and finds out that they broke the deal that she made with the Phoenix Eels. And especially, they just sort of broke it on a whim. They're just kind of like, oh, we needed to use more of the land, and we didn't think it would be so much. We'd been holding on to the deal for a while. That they felt that they could bend the deal that involves the spirits. Where this the whole idea, the dynamic you have to get across is that if the spirit makes a deal with you, it is exact, basically. And she's furious with them. She's just like, goes up to the leader of the Sawan clan and is like, don't you speak. No, no, no. You will speak when I tell you to speak, because you are wrong in this situation in every single way possible. And it's such a contrast to the way she is most of the time, where she always is the careful diplomat in most situations and very nice on a typical basis. But here she is just like angry and like, don't talk, you've messed up. And she's forced to create this deal with them that's even worse, because the spirits now, because they're angry, want to really like humiliate the people of the Sawan clan. They're like, they have all cut off their hair in the whole dishonor ritual, but the spirits are like, it's not good enough that they did that, because their hair will grow back in like a year and they'll move past it. This has to be a lasting thing. And so the only way Yangchen can get them to agree to anything is if she basically helps them come up with punishments that will be lasting for the Sawan clan. And so they come up with the idea that their dishonor has to last for 50 years. They can't grow their hair back for 50 years. And they talk about how like that will effectively ruin the clan for a whole generation. But that's what the spirits wanted. That's how harsh a punishment that they actually do want. And it just highlights that, this is the sort of deals that have to happen. That in this case, the humans were the ones in the wrong here. But there's also just that case of like vengeful spirits, and like that's a bit of an issue as well. But it's a very interesting situation. And then there's also attached to that the whole reason she finds out about this is that she's visiting Zhongdu Chaisi, who I think is going to be potentially one of the main villains in the second book, the second Yangchen book. Right at the end of their meeting, she's just like, oh, Avatar Yangchen, I basically like, I found, otherwise known as intercepted, a hawk message to you from the kind of mayor of Mainka Island. And she's talks about how like, oh, it's terrible what's happening over there. You should probably go do something about it. And Yangchen has to go straight away. She cannot confront Chasey over what's happened here, because she's getting this message late. And this is a serious issue, because someone's breached one of the deals with the spirits. And it's like, whoa, this is we have to deal with this now. So Chasey, just the way she conducts herself is very interesting. There's there's an element I think of a bit of like Lady Huazo in her, if you want a bit of a comparison here, but she I think is pulling a lot of strings here and seems like very much in control of a lot of situations, and we'll come back to her in a second. But other Yangchen sort of important dynamics. So obviously the main thing she's trying to deal with is the main plot of the book, which is that the Shang cities are beginning to have problems. They're beginning to the whole reason that they exist is beginning to kind of push them to their limits. Something needs to change, but the leaders of the Shang cities don't want it to change because they have, basically really important world positions of like the leaders of these cities have developed because of their existence. They don't want that to change. So the whole like premise of like the villains in a way of this is just wanting to keep their power, versus Yangchen wanting to come in and help the people who live in these cities, and the lengths that they will go through to maintain the status quo. And so this is where the whole idea of like the weapon comes into play. Zhongdu Henshi, he's the Zhongdu of Bin the main place in the book. And he feels the only way to fix this is to bring the weapon to Bin and basically use the power of this weapon to scare the Earth King, the Fire Lord, the Water Tribe chiefs into submission to the point where they sort of in a way almost let the place be independent. Because the one threat that Yangchen has to basically threaten the Shang leaders with is, I can see that you're in charge of all this official trade, but you're doing way more than you were actually allowed to do. And I know you're making way more money from this than you probably should be. And the people losing out on money from this are mainly the Earth King. You should be giving him a lot more money than you actually are. What if he was to find out about this? And basically it's this massive threat, because the Earth King means business in this era. Because the whole reason the whole Shang merchant thing is almost in place, and that is the sort of fill-in for proper international trade, is effectively because the Earth King won a major conflict that really scared a lot of the like other nations and people into submission. So they don't want him to be angry at them, because he is so like mercurial is the word with him. He could just send the entire Earth Kingdom army in after them, and they need something to combat that. That's the whole thing with the weapon in this book, is that this is what needs to be dealt with. Another thing to talk about here is the rift. The whole incident in that town with General Old Iron is brought up. So one of the main things we learn is that the name of the town in the past, of course, it later goes on to effectively be Cranefish and, Republic City effectively. But here we find out that its, I suppose, original name is Tianhai Shi. So Lady Tianhai, but Shi on the end. And it's basically as you would expect. The deal that she made with Old Iron is that basically the town would go away, the place would be reverted back to nature effectively, and that the land would be looked after, respected, respectful things to the spirits would be done. The air nomads would make that happen. And it's like, okay, Yangchen actually dealt with this pretty well. A major spirit, and she stopped it from basically destroying half the coast. But she notes that the bigger success in her mind is how she handled like the aftermath of an entire city of people who can't live in the city anymore. That their city has to go back to being just a cliff. Where do all these people go? And the effort that she put in to make sure every single person was relocated, that she used everything that she had to like get the air nomads to help get food donations to help these people until they could be relocated. She lied to people about like skill sets and what you need and how amazing these people are, and made sure that everyone was back in place. And that's one of the most interesting parts of the book in my mind, is just hearing her talk about, like, that was where she, I suppose, truly as the Avatar learned, in a way, like, the connection to people and what she needed to do. That was one thing to just fight the spirit, create the deal, leave. But her facilitating it so that as little people as possible are, like, furious in the aftermath of it. That's how she actually created a sort of lasting kind of peace, that this didn't become a major threat kind of going forward. I really liked hearing about that. And in fact, it was kind of almost like done to the point where, like, people don't even almost believe that it was a spirit. They kind of think it was a natural disaster that happened almost. Really, really interesting stuff. So the other point with Yangchen in bringing Kavik into play at this point is they play on the idea of, I suppose, she doesn't really have a companion before Kavik and her kind of bringing him in. And part of that seems to be the tragedy she's experienced from the memories of past avatars and the fact that she doesn't trust people super easily. It's not a point that is lingered on, like, too much, because other characters view it that she's almost too trusting in some ways. But it's almost a case of, like, if she does trust you and you break that trust, it is a huge thing for her. So that's kind of the dynamic they play with Kavik, is that she's almost impressed with his skills, that he is able to lie to her, and she wants to use that. And there's so many scenes where you see that they actually do get on very well, and that she has needed someone like this to kind of come around with her. And he needed so badly, like, Yangchen, working with Yangchen to just sort of free him from Bin and experience more of the world. Like, it's an important dynamic for both characters. But you see that they really play on this idea of, like, the trust between the two of them. And Kavik grows to, gain Yangchen's trust a lot. But then he does sort of betray that trust. And she's hurt at the end of the book. And she says he is not my companion anymore. You can't be a companion anymore. I put so much trust into you, you've broken that, and I'm not sure we can ever come back from that. But he's been so involved, has so much information now, she can't just sort of, like, completely never talk to him again, speak to him again. So she's like, you will be an asset for me going forward. So the book ends on a kind of a bit of a negative note where, like, they don't really speak to each other. But there's a slight suggestion that I think when they meet again, they might renew their friendship, because Yangchen right at the end is reminded about this thing that they did together, which was saving this woman's life, that they didn't have a lot of water, but then Kavik, like, melted a bunch of snow, got a big pool of water and put it around the woman, and then Yangchen activated the healing, and they did this sort of communal waterbending big healing thing that saved this woman's life, which led to the woman being able to explain that her son is missing. And then at the end of the book, the air nomads say to Yangchen that we were able to find the woman's son and reunite the two of them. And at the end of the book, and after everything that's happened, like, Yangchen is just tired and feels that, like, the effort that she puts in as the Avatar to try and just preempt everything, do everything in the best way possible. She's almost like, maybe I will just start doing things the other way and just waiting and reacting. But hearing about this kind of in a way gives her that hope again, that this is kind of what it's all for. Helping people in a way, like, on an individual basis. And there's just that hope again that that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't the two of them. If it wasn't Yangchen and Kavik helping in that situation. Very, very interesting to see how they go about the dynamic of those two characters. Because with Kavik, they do some very interesting stuff at the end of his story as well. But getting into Kavik now, he is effectively the second main character in the book, which I think is a little bit of a different role to, say, Rangi in the Kyoshi novels. I know people love Rangi, but she definitely, to me, is more fitted in as more, like, supporting character who gets a few key moments. But there aren't many scenes that are, like, directly from, like, Rangi's perspective. That, like, there's a whole chapter where it's just Rangi and like Kyoshi's not really involved. Whereas in this book, there are a lot of scenes where you're with Kavik and Yangchen isn't around. Like, he has sort of a whole plot to himself because he is the the spy, the informant, the undercover guy, whereas Yangchen is the public avatar. So there are scenes together which are great, but then they do have their own individual arcs, as like he tries to get in to the Shang's like employ to try and find the weapon from the inside, as Yang Chen tries to get like a official information straight from the Shang leaders, and it's pretty interesting. And what really makes Kavik a good character is that they give him character points as well. In the same way that Yang Chen has the whole haunting thing, the whole Jetson dynamic, Kavik has the dynamic with his family. He's from the Northern Water Tribe. He's very family focused. He's really committed to. He wants to help his family. He wants to get them out of Bin because things are beginning to go bad. The reason they came to Bin in the first place from the Northern Water Tribe was that things in another water tribe were beginning to go bad, and they wanted to try again. But then there's this other motivation for the character where he wants to find his missing brother. His brother, who's older than him, managed to get a pass out of the city, something that's very difficult to do. And there's like a bit of a mystery surrounding the whole situation. His brother started basically becoming an errand runner, a spy, an informant himself, and then like got so much money, got the family a new house, and then basically left. And they haven't heard from him in the last few years. And so Kavik blames himself in a way for this because of events from the past and stuff that isn't really his fault, but he sort of adds on to little mistakes he's made from his own past, and he feels like, I have to be the one to do this. But he's this character who does have like a good heart. Like when he is doing the mission for Yang Chen, he is 100% committed to the mission. Like there's a scene where literally he meets Yang Chen's other kind of water tribe sort of informants, and they're like, oh, we're going to bring you through the checkpoint. Oh no, wait, the wrong guy's on duty. He will recognize that you're not the usual guy with us. This is going to be a disaster. And he just really quickly is like, we have the same hair, right? It's just our faces really that look different. And he's just like, boom, and just breaks his own nose so that this gruesome injury to his face masks the identity difference. And like, that's how willing he is to kind of put himself on the line for like these missions, because Yang Chen says she will get passes for him and his family to leave Bin but interestingly, he doesn't tell her like the full situation about his brother. He mentions like Kalyan, who's his brother, by name, but never quite says that it's his brother. He says it's like an older person who's important to me, who's not around. And this is where they mention, like, Yang Chen talks to him about Jetson, and Kavik mentions Kalyan. Very, very interesting stuff throughout all of this. So you can see that Kavik is driven by like his family, but also this sense of like he feels he's kind of not good enough in a way, because like Kalyan was a better waterbender than he is, and a better informant, and so on. And Yang Chen, like, almost picking him out of the blue is this kind of crazy thing that like he never in a way wanted to happen, and is constantly like just amazed that he's being kind of pulled along on this wild journey. Like, how did I get myself into this? But you can see that he handles himself very well in a lot of these situations. It's just there are odd moments where he just decides like Yang Chen doesn't need to know this, or and so on. And the actual moment of betrayal is very interesting because it's understandable in a way because it's so emotional to Kavik. So what happens is that he has to infiltrate basically Zongdu Chaisi's employ and become involved there because she is the one who has the weapon. So he has to get involved in that so he can find out what cargo she has, locate the weapon, and maybe try and intercept it if possible. He gets high up enough. He gets in. He's paired up with this partner guy who I'll go into a little bit later on. And then he gets basically Chaisi's right-hand man wants to meet him. And it turns out that the right-hand man is Kalyan, is Kavik's brother. And it's this shocking moment of like, this is where he's been all this time. And he kind of explains to his brother that like, this is why I couldn't contact the family, is because I was working for Zhongdu Henshi, not Chaisi. I'm like a double agent here, basically. And so multiple reasons I couldn't out myself and the connection to you, or out myself as a double agent. I had to work my way up to get to this point. But you can sort of see the potential with the characters here. Kavik and Kalyan are actually quite similar. Kalyan seems to have gone down the path of almost leaning too far into that underworld in a way. Like leaning way too much into being an informant, being a spy, to the point where like feels like he's almost next in line to in a way become a Zhongdu himself, become a Shang merchant himself. That's how involved he is, and that it seems like he's maybe lost that innate goodness in a way that he used to have. He's a little bit more kind of cruel than in a way Kavik remembers, whereas Kavik still has that kind of goodness in him, as you see in a bunch of the scenes with Yangchen, like him rushing to bring the water in to help that woman and being so frustrated that they can't find the boy and stuff like that. And so, especially when you get the sort of like almost more villainous turn of his brother, of like he begins to guilt trip Kavik to get him on his side, of like, I saved you when we were younger, remember? And he brings up the idea of like, I lost 2 fingers from frostbite. Remember that day when we went out into the wilderness on the hunt, and you were like a nuisance in a way, and I had to save you, and I lost my fingers. And he kind of brings it up in that way of like, join me and we're sort of square for that. When Kavik brings up, it's thinking in his mind that we're water tribe, we're close, we're family. Family never thinks about things in that way, like saving someone as something you really need to pay them back for. That's a bit weird, and he's kind of like, is the brother I knew sort of gone in a way? But it's this moment where he just sort of falls to his weakness, Kavik, a little bit, and just agrees to it. And so feeds Yangchen this like false information about where the weapon actually is. Now, he later sort of reverses on this a little bit, that she goes away and does it, but then he organizes her to get the kind of correct information, but it's like just barely in time. Like she arrives on the scene for like the kind of final battle in a way, right with just enough time to resolve it without people dying. Like it's really, really close, and that's why sort of the betrayal aspect of the breach of trust is still, you know, present there. But I think there's just so much potential between the two of them. The banter between them is just, I think, really, really good. You know, start to finish. There's some great stuff of like how happy he is when he gets to fly on a sky bison for the first time, and she like teaches him how to fly her bison as well, quite early on. The scene where he meets Pick and Pack, and without even realizing the two can fly, he nearly like kills one of them, but then realizes, oh, they can fly. And then Yangchen takes a little bit of a revenge for the idea of like, oh, you nearly killed one of my lemurs, and it's played up more as a joke because they could fly the whole time, but like it's just a very kind of fun thing going on. And it's like you see a little bit of a different side of Yangchen around Kavik than you do around like other people. It's kind of highlighted that the few people she has like in a way in her employ who she really, really trusts are like the few people who get to know in a way the real her. That like Kavik notes that there's kind of like 2 Yangchens almost. There's like the air nomad one that like is more of like the typical avatar you'd expect, and then there's the more like character who hires like spies and that sort of thing, and doesn't really trust people, and it's like, what's going on here? So it's a good dynamic, and people will ask, you know, is it romantic or not? Like, what way are they going with that? I think they're focusing more on the friendship for now, but the very basic groundwork, if they wanted to lean more into romance, is there if they want to. There are little moments where like Kavik notes Yangchen is pretty. Yangchen notes that you know, Kavik isn't bad to look at. There's one like there's a character like they have like a meeting. Yangchen's like undercover, and the guy running the shop, I think, clearly thinks it's meant to be some sort of a date between the two, but the way they play between each other, it's not really presented that way. Kavik has a moment where he blushes because he has to like hold on to Yangchen as like she airbends them out of a situation. Some of those really obvious stuff that is just kind of like, is it just typical sort of like teenage awkwardness, or is it actually like this is where they're going between the two of them? I'm not sure. It's an option. It's there if they really, really want to go for it. But it also could work as just this close friendship, I think. I don't really mind either way. I'm happy just to see where it goes, because it makes me excited for the next book to just know that, like, okay, when will they meet? How far into the book will it be when they finally do like meet each other again in a way? Kavik's story comes to an end. Basically, like, a Water Tribe assassin comes to kill him, and then the Water Tribe assassin is taken out by a character you've met a couple of times throughout the book, Mama Ayurnak, Ayuneorak. Not sure about the pronunciation. We'll need the audiobook for that. So she does introduce herself as just Mama to Yangchen, so I'll just refer to her as that for the sake of this. So at the start of the book, you find out that this character basically runs like a restaurant that helps the Water Tribe people in Bin-Er. And like Kavik will give any extra money he has to her because she's been so helpful. So really, really cool, useful, helpful character. Great. Without almost realizing it, you can definitely get to this chapter and not realize it's the same person. Yangchen, later on in the book, is in a different place. And she opens the door and tries to do the whole White Lotus thing of like, let me in. She eventually forces her way in because she knows the whole sequence, and they have to let her in because she knows it. And she meets this character who's in Order of White Lotus, kind of high up, called Mama. And this is where the whole thing about, like, she's the one who criticizes Yangchen for not playing it more patient and stuff like that. And they don't get on, like, particularly well, but the investigation into the weapon gets a little bit further when they eventually, get past their discussion. So Mama is the one who saves Kavik right at the end, and is like, hey, Kavik, I think you'll want to join our organization. So it seems like Kavik is joining the Order of the White Lotus based on the very end of the book, the cliffhanger. Which is going to be fascinating if that's the context in which they meet again. Kavik is with the White Lotus. So that's going to be kind of fun, I think. But yeah, I suppose we have to get towards the weapon, I think, at this point. We finally have to reveal what the deal is with that. So I want to go through the full sort of setup on the weapon, because it is played so much that, this is a mystery. They know that they have something good here. So they tease this out over the course of the entire book and then nail you with the actual reveal. And I think it works. So what happens here is that Yangchen comes in. She gives the threat of like, hey, you've been doing some underhanded business without telling the Earth King. If I let him know, he'll shut you down. This will all go away. And she then spies on the meeting that the Shang merchants have, where Zhongdu Henshi talks about, okay, I think the only way out of this is to use the weapon. And he calls the weapon a name. And they begin to use this word over and over again in the book, without telling you what it is, until right towards the end. Unanimity. So it's basically the word unanimous, but itty. So the idea of, bringing people together in a unanimous decision. That's what this weapon will do. And they keep saying this word over and over again. And they're like, what is it? What is it? And so when you get to the stage where like Yangchen and Kavik go to the other Shang city, Jonduri, which is near the Fire Nation. So this is the Fire Nation Shang city, to meet with Zhongdu Chaisi. Kavik obviously is trying to infiltrate and become one of her sort of thugs in a way, whereas Yangchen has an actual meeting with her. He eventually gets in close enough to where he's like, okay, I'm in or around the unanimity. And they set it up as it's in these three shipping containers here. And Zhongdu Henshi is trying to sort of basically sneak it out from under the control of Zhongdu Chaisi, using Kavik's brother, Kalyan, who he has in his employ, acting as like a sleeper agent like within Chaisi's kind of organization. So he thinks he's being super clever, Henshi, in doing this and getting this out. And so there's a really fun scene where you're just like, oh my god, like, if he could just open the boxes, we would find out what this weapon is. And we then cut over to the investigation from Yangchen and Mama Ayurnurk. What they do is that they find out that, okay, Mama had come down to the Port Tugok. They're in the Southern Water Tribe, Shang City. She had come down there to investigate what she had heard of as like spiritual goings-ons, basically. Lights in the sky near this mountain. So they fly there to investigate it. They can't really see anything because there's snow covering the mountain. So Yangchen goes into the Avatar state, gets rid of all the snow, so they can see the mountainside very clearly. And what they see is that there are just a ton of big craters in the side of this mountain. They investigate them up close, and they're like, these look like meteorite strikes. That's how like intense, how big these craters are. And then from a distance, they can see that like, oh, they're all the way like up and down the mountain, and there's like there seems to be these like distance markers almost on the sides. They're testing a weapon here for distance and power. What's going on? And it's this, you're left with just this kind of like half kind of situation of like, okay, the weapon they're testing on a mountainside, firing it into the side of the mountain. What's going on? I don't understand. But then on the Kavik side of the story, what happens next? As the crates that have the weapon in it are being unloaded in Bin the crane holding one of the boxes falls. The crate smashes open, and it's this shocking moment of like, this is how it's going to get revealed. It's just a bunch of rocks. And because you don't know the full situation, you're just like, oh my god, what do these rocks mean? Are these special rocks? Are they special meteorite things that explode or something like that? But then Kavik looks and is just like, Henshi doesn't seem concerned about this. He's just walking off with the characters who were guarding the boxes. And then it clicks with him of like, when he looked into the room, he noticed the three guards, and that like, okay, they're all pretty tall. They all seem to have the kind of gold eyes, and he's like, oh, they must all be firebenders. And the second he says that line, that they're all firebenders, it clicked for me. I knew exactly what they were doing, and I thought it was amazing. It goes on to basically get confirmed, in case you haven't figured it out already from the clues. The weapon is 3 combustion benders. And I just thought this was incredible, that they completely led you astray on the whole idea of what it is. That you think it's some sort of a actual physical weapon or a gas or something like that. Something that could be like held in a box. But the box was just to basically make it look like you're actually shipping something of note, when it's the people that are important. And you begin to connect a few dots here from the way this weapon was talked about. That it was discussed that like research has been going into this for a while, for a couple of generations of Zongdus, leaders of the Shang clan. The Shang merchants have been researching this. Zhongdu Chaisi specifically has seemingly found the solution and has perfected it, which is why they're ready to be used. And it's noted that like a lot of research, a lot of money went into this, and suddenly it's like, oh, whoa, they've been researching how to get people who have combustion bending. It's never referred to as combustion bending because in this era, it's being sort of basically viewed as like, this is the first time anyone is ever seeing this technique. Yangchen, when she sees it later on, notes that she has memories of effectively all the past avatars, and none of them have ever seen this technique. So clearly it's obviously really rare and is only just about come around. And the idea seems to be that somewhere in the relatively recent history of the Shang merchants, they know about it, and I think it's very heavily linked to Chasey, what is going on with this. So we get the reveal of these three characters. And again, like I said, they're all tall. So they continue that trend of like all combustion benders being sort of tall and imposing characters. And he brings them into the city and effectively begins using their powers. They get up in a high tower. He has them all positioned in different spots so they have good coverage. And they just start bringing the riots in Bin-Ur, the problems, into line. The Earth Kingdom's forces come in, but they can't because there's explosions keeping them back. And it's just this massive standoff where you realize that this is a very effective weapon, multiple combustion benders, but Henshi has used them in a way that makes them not like the winning solution. That it's just a siege that they have here that is reliant on three people keeping up their high powered special attack forever, basically. And it's noted here that he is in an awful position. And the combustion benders realize it and they're like, we want, I think he says as much, we would like 20 times the price you were offering us before. And he's like, what? I can barely afford 1 times. And so he sort of loses it at this point. And it's just kind of like, fine, go ahead. But if that's the way it's going to be, we got to take some people out here. We got to show we mean business. And he kind of like start killing people. So right as the head combustion bender is about to basically destroy the water tribe district of Bin-Ur, his ability just doesn't work all of a sudden. And the combustion bender, Henshi begin to feel like lightheaded and like they're about to collapse. And then so all of a sudden, like Yangchen, Kavik, some of the other characters who are involved in this come in and just capture them. And it's like, whoa, it's over already. And then they quickly in the next chapter are like, and we got the second combustion bender really easily in the same way. Bit more of a complicated situation with the third one. They make more of a kind of song and dance about it, but they explain what happened with the first two. Of Yangchen using her sort of fancy maneuver in a way to immediately stop a combustion bender, which is that she notes that they need to use heavy breathing, really strong kind of breath of fire, amazing breath control to make this technique work. So what she does is she uses this technique that she describes herself as being a vile technique that she has to be so careful to use effectively, and that is sucking the air out of a room. And that's what happened to them. No one realized that it was happening because, you know, it's not a violent technique in terms of like being noticeable. They just suddenly notice they can't breathe, and she has to be so careful to keep track so that she doesn't kill them. That's what happened with the first two, and they can't quite get close enough to make that happen with the third one. So, you know, Yangchen has to sort of put herself out in the open. The partner character, you know, as part of the thugs, you know, with Kavik, is a guy who's actually revealed to be part of the Yuyan clan. And he's a bit kind of crazy. He's gone down the sort of spiritual side of things to make amends for stuff he's done in the past. But they give it to him of like, Yangchen has kind of got him back on track a little bit. He needed some spiritual kind of awakening, and Yangchen has helped that to happen. They hand him a bow for the first time in a while. Can you make the shot? Yangchen puts herself on the line. He hits the final combustion bender in her shoulder, and Yangchen then has the choice of like, do I just go up by the window, suck the air out, and go in the usual way? Or do I assume she's injured enough to where I can actually just walk in? She makes the decision to just walk in, and she realizes it was a good one, because assessing the wound, she realizes it probably would have killed the person if she had sucked the air out of the room. So this crazy situation actually gets resolved quite quickly. And they have to cover it up. Yangchen realizes that no world leader can know about these combustion benders, because all of them, especially the Earth King, if he finds out about them, are going to want these firebenders with that level of destructive ability on his side. This is going to change the balance of like the world leaders. So she has all of them, all the 3 combustion benders and Henshi, basically held as sort of like prisoners to a degree, but it's more peaceful kind of prisoner type situation, almost a vacation in the Northern Air Temple, and she's trying to basically hold back the information. And that's more or less where that side of the plot really comes to an end, where we're just left with this idea of she sort of knows that eventually the world leaders are going to find out about those combustion benders. She sort of described it as like angry spirits was what was happening instead of combustion benders, but they're going to find out, and she needs to basically figure out what's going on. And that's my thoughts on, I think, what's going to happen here, because all the three combustion benders are tight-lipped about where they got their abilities from, how it happened. The one thing that is said with any level of detail is that, one, research was done on it. The main guy says that he got his abilities from bitter work, torturous training, and that a lot of other people drown trying to get the same abilities. And it's like drowning, like underwater, like that sort of thing, or what are you talking about here? And it's kind of like, oh, torturous. Is there some sort of a thing now where, like, if you find the right person capable of this ability, you have to pressurize them in some sort of a way that will draw out this innate ability, and it somehow involves potentially drowning them? I'm fascinated to know what's going on here, because it makes it seem like Chasey has figured it out in terms of like whatever lineage is needed. She can maybe locate what people will or have the potential to be combustion benders, and she now has some sort of a method to force the abilities to the surface, or something like that. The other thing with Chasey that I bring up here, just because like wild theories are going to come out before the next book comes out, they immediately note she is pregnant. She is 7 months pregnant. Yangchen didn't know this before. No father is mentioned, and for the most part, apart from like 2 characters who meet her noticing that she's pregnant, it doesn't really get brought up, but it's clearly there for a reason. And it makes it feel like, oh, like, are they going to do some sort of a thing where like the child is part of the plan in some way, and like the child will also have the potential for combustion bending? Because in her conversation with Yangchen, Chasey sort of notes a few things, and you don't know if she's telling the full truth here, that her own lineage, she doesn't really know it. That Yangchen just assumes she's Fire Nation because she's the Zongdu of the fire-related Shang city. But she kind of says that, like, my lineage doesn't have any bending in it, so that doesn't confirm one way or the other where I'm from. And it's just this idea that she's from islands that are, like, somewhere in the sort of fire earth area, but it also could be more like towards the south, and she's just kind of like somewhere in the middle. And I'm almost like, does she have the like almost right like genes or something like that? Has she figured out the whole situation of how this ability comes to a head? My main takeaway from it is just that they're going to explore the origin of combustion bending. I guess we will finally get an answer to this, which I'm really, really excited for, and I think is actually going to make for a really interesting plot, assuming, you know, they execute on it really, really well. But I think that's most of what I want to talk about in the spoiler video. So obviously combustion benders being the weapon is like the big spoiler that I really hope people don't just throw about online, because it is a really cool reveal when it happens. Again, they don't go all in on it just here. It's very much a tease for the future, like a bunch of things in this book, like a tease for the future. Yangchen, will she find Jetson? Maybe in the future. Kavik orders White Lotus, next book. Combustion bender stuff, next book. Chasey, next book. Where things are going to go with Kalyan, Kavik's brother, I guess next book. Very interesting stuff, especially because FCE said in this interview that likely the second book will take place in Taku, which is the one Shang city we don't go to in this book. We go to all the other ones, but we don't go to Taku. So very interested to see that. I'm assuming it will be more John Dury and Taku focused, just with the characters who will likely be involved. And we'll see what they do from there. I probably left out still a bunch of other little kind of subplots, maybe even some somewhat important ones, but there's a lot to try and cover in just one video. So this is where, again, I'll mention chapter analysis videos will be starting on Monday, and we'll be, because we're just doing one chapter in each video, we'll be able to focus on everything revealed in each chapter, and we'll see if what we can uncover going through it that way. Because I'm still learning the book. I've read it twice. Still learning the book. Still little bits and pieces that I need to pick up. So there are my spoiler thoughts on The Dawn of Yangchen. Highly recommended. Definitely pick it up. But if you do have any questions, leave them below. But again, please word your questions in a way that don't immediately say all the spoilers in them. Like, if you want to ask about the weapon, mention the weapon. Don't straight up say combustion benders. Just be a bit careful with this stuff. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.